Shalom, all praises to Yahweh, Bashem El Shai, Bashem El Rakar Kwadash. Double honors unto the apostles and elders of Great Millstone Ruel, and Shalom to the whole full elect. This is Paya I love the GMS London camp, and this is news and prophecy, prophecy and news. I have an article here from Bloomberg, alright, and this is dealing with something that's just come to pass very recently, within the past day, even a few hours or so. I think there's confirmation because it was put up on gov.co.uk, right, which is a government site, I believe, best way to describe it. But so really, what you had said was that Boris Johnson said that with the whole CV19, that basically they said this lockdown would impose like tougher restrictions, and the police wouldn't be basically giving people a blight the way they were before. And right, then you had a superintendent, some high-ranking police officer up in the Midlands around Birmingham, basically said that he wanted more powers during this lockdown, all right, to impose certain things upon the people, all right. So what you're seeing is gradualism, which all the brothers of Great Millstone, GMS, have been saying repetitively over and over again, because what we're dealing with right now is incremental, like gradual changing of the tide in terms of society, all right? And all you got to look at is, how gradualism works, bringing the world or the people, the subjects, to their knees. Best example in the word is Joseph, right, in Egypt with Pharaoh. How he basically had this, when the famine began, when it was hard times for the rest of the world, when they were, troubled, how basically they sold all their rights away bit by bit, all right, to the point where they said, like, in the course of 2 years, they said, look, man, if we don't, if we don't, it's not good that we die in your sight. That's what they said to Pharaoh. So they basically more or less said, like, we'll sell ourselves into slavery with all that we have. And then they basically, Pharaoh took all the land, and then they had to go and plow the land and give him, I believe, 20% of what they earned, and they kept the rest, all right? So basically, I'm going to get into this article, and Lord willing, you be edified. So it says, UK imposes mandatory CV tests on all incoming travellers. All right, so now this is the next level. All right, so now you must be tested when you arrive in the UK. It says straps. Pre-departure tests will be another line of defense. Fines for people who don't get tested within 72 hours of travel. All right, so if you don't get tested within 72 hours, you basically get fined. So let's read this. All passengers arriving in the UK will be required to prove they do not have the CV19, showing a negative test result taken within 72 hours of the start of their journey. All right. Under new rules announced by the British government, anyone failing to produce the evidence of a negative test will be hit with an immediate fine of £500. Wow. Travellers arriving, that's like more or less the price of a ticket. For even with some flights, that's like double the price, or even, 5 times the price. Travellers arriving from countries that are not on the government's open travel corridor list will be required to isolate at home for 10 days regardless of their test results. The measures set out by Transport Security Secretary Grant Shapps will come into force next week with passengers arriving at a British port by plane, boat or train. The plan is aimed at stopping new strains of CV19 coming into the UK. such as those seen in Denmark and South Africa. The government said, we already have significant measures in place to prevent imported cases of CV19, but with new strains of the virus developing internationally, we must take further precautions, Shaps said in an email statement. Pre-departure tests will provide a future line of defense, helping us control the virus. Oh, damn, man. Uh, as we roll out the vaccine at pace over the coming weeks, ministers were criticized for taking too long to impose border restrictions during the first wave of the pandemic last spring. This week, British authorities put the country into its third national lockdown as infection rates soared. The death toll from Corona CV now stands at more than 78,000. All right, that's what they're saying over here in the UK. All right, so it says UK bets. Nah, that's a story. Officials have been in talks for several days on how to coordinate a border policy. All right, remember it tells you in the book of Second Maccabees, the 8th chapter, how by patience and policy they basically took over the whole world, dealing with the Romans, and that's what they're utilizing with this. All right, this kingdom is known as Babylon the Great. All right, it's the great because it's the greatest of them all. All right, this is the peak of all wickedness on the earth. There's never been a time like this. There'll never be a time like this. And basically, this Babylon the Great, the word Babel basically means confusion. All right, Babylon or Lon means land. So this is land of confusion. So this is the place where all of these things are everything that you've seen before is gonna be reenacted in this kingdom to his you know 100th power basically. So let me read. Officials have been in talks for several days on how to coordinate a border policy across all four nations of the UK, which have control over their own transport policies. In a separate statement, the Scottish Government has agreed to the plan and said the measures will be brought in as soon as possible. Passengers will need to show their negative test results before boarding and will be stopped if necessary. There will be some exemptions from the new rules, including for haulers, children under the age of 11, and for travellers leaving countries without an adequate testing infrastructure in place. All right. On Thursday, Prime Minister Boris Johnson set out his blueprint for mass vaccination program, all right, to protect about 15 million elderly and vulnerable people across the UK and their carers by a self-imposed deadline of February 15th. Okay, after that, the government will look at whether to begin lifting some of the lockdown rules, all right? So basically, this is giving you restriction as to where you can't leave. Really, this is what this is saying. You can't leave your country, all right, or come into this country unless you're tested. And if you do, you're gonna be fined. And let's not forget, this is what people tend to forget. The key events within this pandemic, all right? One of the key events was that they were having people forcibly stay at they said holding centers basically once they arrive in a country and they couldn't leave. All right, they were forced to sign some legislation, and people attempted to leave but they weren't allowed. All right, so we're basically, Lord, where from the looks of it, that's where they're working towards. All right, to a point where, because remember, these people have some form of liberty as to where they can escape from these said things, even though they have a hit with an immediate fine of £500. They'll still be able to walk on a maneuver and whatnot. But as you can see, it's something that they've already done that they're not mentioned. They haven't spoke about again, but they got the intel on it. there's a good chance they may bring that back, man. All right. Again, you even see what's going on over there in Capitol Hill with civil war in the U.S. Basically, uprisings of the people. That's going to incur more restrictions on the people in terms of movement. All right. Not everyone's going to be allowed to move, and they're going to place greater restrictions on the people due to that. But that's going to be the mood all across the board. All right. So I'm going to read the scripture to hone in on this point. It's the book of Second Ezra 15 and 17. It reads, "A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able." All right. So a man will desire to go into a city. They desire to go into London, which is a city. He may desire to go into America, which is a city. All right. And they won't be able. Mhm. So it says, "For because of their pride, the city shall be troubled, the houses shall be destroyed, and the men shall be afraid." And this is what it's culminating to. This this society is devolving into a into a free for all, basically, where people don't have the basics that are needed, and are basically in lacking that, they're gonna be going into a place where of volatility, all right, where they're gonna start troubling one another, all right. You got civil unrest in the U.S., all right, and it's basically you got the same thing is gonna it's gonna come all across the world, man, all right, because that's the prophecies written in the book of Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, around all throughout the Bible. So, and with that, man, I pray you're edified. Till the next one, say shalom.